So, we are going to be discussing Circe chapters 4 through 6 today, which brought us back to our favorite person, Ovid. Um, and yeah, we've got some interesting things here, mythologically speaking, because the story that comes about in these chapters, the source material for it is a lot, well, it's not super different, but it's different enough that it's like, these are some interesting choices, some interesting dots to connect that weren't connected before.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting.
Yeah, so since we do our Wednesday episode now where we talk about things that aren't related to the content we're reading, we're going to just kind of go with Circe, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 4, we open up with Circe seeing a ship for the first time and realizing that on board that ship is a man. And she is still very curious about mortals. You know, she's asked her parents, she asked Prometheus at one point. She has literally only seen mortals from afar during her sister Pasiphae's wedding at this point. So, what she says is she had heard of ships in stories. They were golden and as huge as leviathans, which I usually only hear about leviathans from Christians, I'm pretty sure, rather than Greek mythology. But so I need to look into that one a little bit more. But let's see, their rails carved from ivory and horn. They were towed by grinning dolphins or else crewed by 50 black-haired nereids, faces silver as moonlight. So she's talking about ships that gods build. But
Mm-hmm.
this ship is different. She said the mast was as thin as sapling. Its sail hung skewed and fraying. Its sides were patched. I remember the jump in my throat when the sailor lifted his face, burnt as it was and shiny with sun, a mortal. And so she gets her first glance at this mortal dude. And she's immediately drawn in just because she's like, I've never seen this before. I'm so curious. She describes him for a long time. Things like his hair was long and black, draggled from wave spray, clothes were worn, neck was scabbed. Essentially talking about the flaws, because that's the kinds of things that she doesn't see with immortals. All of them are able to regenerate, and so she's like literally never even seen wounds like this that last on people and that
Mm-hmm.
leave marks. Um, Also, it's interesting before she gets into like actually jumping onto his ship. She says, I could hear my pulse loud in my ears. I thought again of those stories of nymphs ravished and abused by mortals. But this man's face was soft with youth, and the hands that drew up his catch looked only swift, not cruel. And so, this is why she decides maybe this mortal is safe. Um, and the other thing, okay, I wanted to see your opinion on this line in particular, because right after that she says, anyway, in the sky above me was my father called the Watchman. If I was in danger, he would come.
Yeah, I read that and like my eyes rolled into like the stratosphere
Yes.
because I was like, oh, is that what people usually think when their dad is watching them all the time? Because that's not what I would think. Ew. Like, no, get away from me.
Yeah.
Him watching me is bad, bad, bad. Like, I was like, when she started saying that, like, oh, my dad's above me all the time, I was like, oh, that's scary. Like, you can never get away from him. And she's like, oh, he will take care of me. And I'm like, no, he won't.
Yeah, this is still her having rose-colored glasses of her father because we see this fall apart as the book continues. But
Mm-hmm.
here she's still very much in the place of like, oh, my dad is up in the sky. He would never let anything bad happen to me. And yeah, I immediately thought of you when I read that line because of a lot of your stories of your dad meddling in your life, like especially when you were a late teenager, early adult.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I guess one of the more, like, mild ones like that was when I was trying to get a job when I was 15. And they didn't hire me at first, and then they did, and I worked there for like 3.5 years, like the entire time I was in high school. Like I quit that job pretty much like right when I was moving like to go to college was when the store closed, so it just happened to happen at the same time. But I worked there for a really long time. And then I found out like a year or so after that that the whole reason why I got that job is because my dad called the store and threatened to sue them for like gender discrimination if they didn't hire me because they hired my best friend who was a boy.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
and and so like none of the managers and stuff ever liked me the whole time I worked there, and I just thought I don't know what I thought. I just didn't like think about it. There were times when I would call into work because I was a teenager and I didn't want to go to work, and they never fired me. And I realized afterwards, I'm like, that's why they never fired me. That's why they never did anything to me because they were afraid that my dad was gonna sue the stupid store. And I just had like all that time I thought I got a job because I like did a good job at the interview. And
Mhm.
this was like 5 years after that, and I realized like I have no idea how to do a good interview now then, and I've never learned to this day.
Yeah, well, and just like neurodivergent people like ourselves are not good at like selling ourselves. We're
No.
very honest about our abilities, and so we don't do the thing that people normally do in interviews where they like lie about their abilities. We have to be reminded that lying is something that is considered normal in interviews, and even still, it's like I don't want to do this, and I don't think I can pull it off.
Yeah. And like I will say like I went in for an interview at within the company that I work for a couple months ago, and they said that I answered the questions correctly, but I explained them wrong.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is exactly what it's like to be autistic and try to do anything. Because they basically said, like, yeah, you said what we wanted you to say, but you said it in the wrong order. And they wanted you to say it in like a certain way. And I was like, I would never say it that way. It would never occur to me to explain something that way. And I'm like, okay, it's good to know why I've never gotten any of the jobs I've really wanted to get throughout the years. Because that's has to be why.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but either way, that's the kind of stuff and like, that was my dad trying to be helpful.
Hmm.
Like, he was like, my daughter wants a job, so I'm going to help her get a job. And so his way of doing that was threatening people.
Yeah.
Like, that was his version of like showing love was I'm going to threaten some people with legal action so that they are forced to give my daughter a job.
Hmm.
That's the best he could do. Like, I feel like that really explains him a lot.
Yeah. And I'm sure that this meddling came up in other places in your life where it was just like, I really don't want my dad over my shoulder, but like being afraid that he was a lot.
Well, yeah, all like I don't know. I still wonder about that. Like, he's been dead for 11 years, but I always wonder like are there stories about things that he was cuz these are just the things that I know about.
Hmm.
And I was like, what are things that I don't know about? Like, did he terrorize like my teachers? Like, I know that he somewhat terrorized my coaches sometimes. I know about those things. I remember them. But I was like, what about the stuff that I don't know about? Did he like call the schools that I went to? Did he like do other things? Did he like try to talk to like parents of my friends or whatever and they never told me because they wouldn't want to tell me things like that? There's just so many things that he could have done that beyond what he was already doing that I just will never know. It's just there's no way to know for sure.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. The other part of that I thought was interesting was just the fact that like the god in these myth stories they have the nymphs being attacked by the humans.
Hmm.
And so when I see that, I'm like, are the people in power trying to make sure that we know that the lower people are also horrible too? Or what is that? Like, why are you making like a whole thing in all these stories about how the humans also attack the nymphs? So what the gods do isn't that bad because the humans are about how the humans also attack the nymphs. So what the gods do isn't that bad because the humans are also bad. And I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, I can like see like the humans who wrote those stories, and I'm like, were you trying to justify your own actions by making like lower people also do those things, even though they probably weren't doing them as much as you were because that's just generally how those things work.
Yeah.
I was like, that's
Um,
interesting that she's more afraid of the humans than like the gods that do what they all do that she knows about.
yeah, it's pretty. it's yeah, how can you not be? Well, and I do think to some extent she does have some fear around her peers and some like, I'm going to not let myself be seen too much because she's already getting othered like by pretty much everybody. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's like there's no safety for her at all, which like I felt pretty immediately. But anyways, she decides to take her chance on this mortal. And so she sees the ship coming and she's like, "Hail, mortal." And he responds, "Hail, what goddess do I address?" And she remarks, "His voice was gentle in my ears, sweet as summer winds." Which, so we talked about her voice in the earlier chapters because the word used to describe her in the Odyssey is having a very human voice, is like how it's usually translated. I always considered it more that, like, maybe she wasn't using some ancient language that the Titans have, or she was
Hmm.
just speaking more plainly to Odysseus. But
Hmm.
Madeline decided to make that kind of one of her defining features. And so for her to say his voice was gentle and pleasing when everybody else thinks that Circe, who apparently has a human-like voice, is grating to listen to, was also something that stuck out to me.
Hmm.
So she meets this sailor. It turns out to be a guy named Glaucus. And she is, at first, he's trying to figure out, like, how do I correctly pay respect to you? So he's asking, "What goddess are you? Am I in your waters? I'm really sorry." And she's like, "I don't have any waters." She also says, and this is where I got afraid for her, is she's just like, "Oh, I don't have any powers." She says, "I'm not like that. I have scarcely any powers at all and cannot hurt you. Be comfortable as you were." And I was like, "Oh, girly, don't tell that to a mortal while you're literally saying I'm afraid because mortals jump nymphs."
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I this whole interaction, I was like terrified for her. And I
Hmm.
was like, I wonder what people who don't have severe childhood trauma from sexual abuse thought when they read this for the first time. Like, were they relaxed?
I
Because
wasn't.
I was
Yeah.
not. I was like waiting for something absolutely horrendous to happen to her. And I was like very like almost like confused. That was a nice surprise because I was sure that
Yeah.
something horrible was about to happen.
Yeah, I was too at first, especially because like she's trying to make him feel at ease this whole time. She's noticing his eyes are darting and he won't like look at her straight, and she's
Hmm.
like, "I do that when I'm in the presence of my dad and my uncles. Like this guy is just really scared." And so that's why she tells him, "I don't have any powers." But yeah, I was like, "Girlie, you're in danger." Let's see. So she eventually tells him like who she is in relation to the gods. Like my dad is the sun. Probably even my grandpa is the ocean. Even though we don't have that, but they kind of build this friendship. So she finds out his name is Glaucus. He comes every day. He comes to go fish, and he basically will stay with her for a bit and tell her stories. And of course, because she's surrounded by immortals, these are stories she eats up. She's never heard these stories of the likes that mortals tell, at least not from a mortal's perspective. Maybe she's
Hmm.
heard stories about mortals from her family, but like they're usually going to be not in favor of the mortals. Something that kind of almost reminded me a little bit of the Achilles Patroclus thing that she had in Song of Achilles is her fascination with him at first is watching how extremely human he is. So she watches him go through the tasks that he has to do with fishing, like repairing his nets and, like working on the boat, cleaning the deck, starting a fire. She talks about sparking flint. And so
Oh yeah, we do that here
yeah,
when
yeah.
we have
So
bonfires.
when she sees him sparking the fire, she starts thinking of Prometheus because she's like, "Hey, I know the guy who gave that to you."
Hmm.
And once she starts like revealing, "Oh, hey, I know Prometheus. I saw him get punished for that." Glaucus gets scared of her again. And it's because like, "Wait, how old are you?" And she is, trying to say like I was alive during this very ancient story you mortals all have, and he thought they were the same age. And so eventually she's like, you know what, I wasn't alive for that. You're right, we're the same age because she doesn't know how else to let that one go.
I I liked that part because it would be absolutely terrifying to talk to somebody who was thousands of years old. Like, I
Hmm.
feel like there was entirely too many vampire YA fanfics or fanfic slash stories that were published in like the after Twilight came out,
Hmm.
and all of them just kind of like skim over like the quote unquote age difference or how or like just like immortal beings. And so I liked that Madeline Miller wrote this part where he was absolutely terrified because it that is like a brain like breaking thing to think about for us to like the thing I thought of was like one of those facts that I like keep that I think about every once in a while
Hmm.
is that the time between when Cleopatra was alive to now is shorter than the time from Cleopatra to the first pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Like I heard that once and I every like couple weeks I just think about that like what? Like what do you mean that that's like a shorter time period? Like how long did they rule? Like I love ancient Egypt. That's one
Hmm.
of those things that I was also hyper fixated on for and still am on and off. And so, but it's just like the way that like really gives you an idea of like how long those people ruled for in a way that is like so hard to even grasp. Like it hurts my brain to even like picture that in my head of how long those people were in power from the time of Cleopatra to now. Like what do you mean that was shorter than that? And so that's like basically what he's doing, but he's looking at the person who's saying that and it's like that is scary. Like it's scary that that happened a couple chapters ago and it's been thousands of years and like nothing has changed for
Yeah,
her.
and
Like
she
she's
even
just still
says,
living the same life she was a couple only seemingly a couple years ago, but it was actually thousands of years ago. Like they have it's just like the whole thing of the gods that they have no concept of time or like things passing or change because how could they when thousands of years go by for them as if it's nothing.
well, yeah, and she even says when they're having this whole thing where she's like sort of revealing how old she is, where he's like, "Wait, what does it feel like to be divine?" She says, "Those years are nothing. I made no use of them. You know as much of the world as I do." And yeah, so she's still very young and naive for God despite being this old.
It's so
And
weird.
yeah, she's still an abused kid because in the next paragraph we have her talking about how, like, going to go see Glaucus is fun for her because now that her siblings have left, Aedes is out in Colchis, Perseus is out in Persia, I think, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then Pasiphae is in Crete. That her mom's basically just taking everything out on her and talking about like, oh, now I have to hear Circe's voice all the time. Why is she the child that was left behind? And so she just keeps going back to this mortal and trying to be friends with him. So the moment that it changes though is one day Glaucus shows up late and he basically does not look happy. He doesn't want to come sit with her. And he says, I can't keep coming back because our hauls are down. He's not getting as much fish. And so his dad says, he's not allowed to stay. And she says, come sit with me. I can help. And he's like, you already told me you don't have powers, so I know you can't help. You have no divinity over these waters. So like how could you help me? Especially because she revealed that like her mom is freshwater, not seawater. And so
Mm-hmm.
like even with the lineage, her ability to help is very limited here. Um and it's kind of implied here that his father abused him before this instance because he also looks a little beat up when he comes. It says there's a bruise on his cheek. And so she panics and she decides to go to Tethys, who is essentially a grandmother figure. And she's like, hey, I need you to help me. Can you make sure that this fisherman has a really good haul? Because I want him to come back. And um, Tethys says, what does this mortal offer you in exchange? Circe says, offer me? She shook her head. My dear, they must always offer something, even if it is small, even if only wine poured at your spring, else they will forget to be grateful after. And so Circe doesn't even have a spring, which she brings up, and she says, please, I'll never see him again if you don't do this for me. And so Tethys decides to do it. She says, I will grant your wish and fill his nets, yet in return, let me hear you swear you will not lie with him. You know your father thinks to match you better than with some fish boy. She
I start
swears.
I started laughing when you said the line about like they have to give you something if you're going to be nice to them because otherwise they'll take advantage of you. And I'm like, every time they say things like the gods say things like this, I'm like, what did you guys think about the poor people in like Greece? Can you, my God, that is legitimately what they think about us still now. Of
Yeah, well,
like, take our scraps and be grateful.
I mean, yes, but like I do think there was so I know at least in Rome that they would offer portions of their actual meal, very much like Percy Jackson, what we see
Hmm.
in when they're in the dining hall. I don't know if that was a Greek thing too, but like the Romans actually had gods of the household you would do that for, and a lot of the sacrifices and stuff were state sponsored. But it was kind of like you'd take off the top of your own meals kind of deal. So that's what poor people would do. But of course, if you're richer and you have more to offer and you have a bigger flock or you have the whitest cow, because they love purity in that sense,
Hmm.
then yeah, you probably are more favored by the gods, and it becomes a chicken or the egg thing. Are you more favored by the gods because you're rich, or are you rich because you're more favored by the gods? Who knows? Yeah. Um, but anyways, after Tethys decides to grant this, in under the condition that Circe does not sleep with him, he comes back and he's like, "Thank you. I don't know how you did it, but like, I had fish literally leaping into my nets before I even dropped them." And she tells him it was my grandma. She helped me out, and he like kneeled to her. She says, "Don't kneel to me because it wasn't me." And he says, "No, it was you. You were the one who persuaded her. Circe, miracle, blessing of my life, you've saved me." And he also says, "I wish you were a god, then I could thank you as you deserve." And so she's starting to get down bad for him at this point because he's kissing her hands and she's like, his curls are falling on my wrist, and like she's eating this up. So they just continue their routine after this of sitting together and talking. Um, her all the while like realizing slowly this man is immortal and I am not. He's going to start aging eventually. He's going to grow old and die, and I don't want that.
I'm like picturing that meadow scene in Twilight.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, where Bella was like scared about her own mortality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long have you been 16? A while. That's basically this scene.
Yeah. So after this, after she starts having these realizations, she starts asking around to her family, is there any way we could make this dude immortal? And everyone keeps telling her the same answer. No, like that doesn't happen for mortals unless it's already written in their fate. Like
Hmm.
nobody can, and it is canonical in Greek mythology. Nobody can change fate except for Zeus.
Hmm.
And so she keeps getting this answer, but then she brings up, is there not, I do not know the word, some device, some bargain with the fates, some trick, some pharmaca. And it was a word she had heard from Aedes, herbs that have power. And her dad's just like, or wait, no, it was her grandmother who she's talking
Hmm.
to at this point. You dare speak of that? Speak of what? Child, I have done as much for you as may be done, and there is no more. Go from here, and let me never hear you speak of that wickedness again. So, this is where we first learn that this concept of herbs that have magical powers that Aedes brought up in chapter 3 is kind of a forbidden thing. It's kind of something that the gods are a little bit fearful of because if you're saying, don't even talk about this, like you are seriously scared of it.
Hmm. You can understand why they would be, because it's
Hmm.
definitely something that they would see as not natural.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's like weirdly ironic that a lot of people do that sort of thing who like the idea of feeling like they're communicating with the gods,
Hmm.
but at least in their own stories, they hate it.
Yeah.
Like, well, okay. I guess that's something. But there was something I was gonna say about this. Okay, so this whole part when she is like running around with, like a chicken with her head cut off, trying to figure out a way to turn
Hmm.
him into a god. Um, the entire time when I was reading this, I just kept thinking, like, did you even ask him if
Yeah.
he wanted to be a god? Because you're not asking him. You're trying to find all these things to permanently change his body, his life forever, and have you ever even asked him if he wants to?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm gonna get to the mythological stuff in a second, but I want to. We're almost to the end of chapter 4, so
Mm-hmm.
um, as she's asking her grandma all of this of like how do I turn this man immortal, she realizes everybody can hear her and she has no shame. Girl is down bad. She's like, I don't care, even though everyone behind her is like, she thinks just because she's the daughter of the sun she may uproot the world to please herself. And she's just fantasizing about a world where she could stay with Glaucus, where they could have their little chats in the meadow forever. And so this brings me to the story of Glaucus. Now, Glaucus in mythology, we don't know much about his mortal life at all because the two source materials we have about him just like briefly say he was a fisherman before he got turned into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Circe having a crush on him in this way is interesting because in the source material, she does not have a crush with him on him until Scylla comes along, which
Mm-hmm.
is going to be in the next chapter. And the reason why she has a crush on Glaucus is Aphrodite is punishing her. So Aphrodite was having an affair with Ares at this point. She's married to Hephaestus, having the affair with Ares. And the person who could see it all and decides to blow up her spot is Helios. It's her dad. And so
Mm-hmm.
Aphrodite basically as a punishment for that whole situation decides to make Circe fall in love with him. Now, when she makes him fall in love with him is after he turns immortal. So, I kind of want to get on to chapter 5 before I talk about him as an immortal because it does change his appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So, she starts realizing, I think I know a plant that could potentially have this power. It's a plant where Kronos' blood was spilled. And it's like interesting because in the mythology it's grass. Glaucus actually changes himself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not exactly a flower, although like yellow and looks like bells. I don't know if that's giving daffodil or something of that family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyways, she takes him out to a meadow and she tries feeding him something. It doesn't really work.
Oh wait, there's this tiny line here that he says when she's trying to convince him to fall
Yeah.
asleep, which you know is something you always do to somebody when they've given you consent is try to convince them to fall asleep so you can try to drug them, which is essentially what she does during this part. But he says a line about like she says like, "Oh, you look tired" or something like that,
Hmm.
and he's like, "I'm always tired," and I'm like, "That is an abused child." We're
Yeah.
always tired. We're always tired. Always. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's what made me be really sure that he was by his dad because I'm like, yeah, you're never not exhausted when you have somebody like that around you all the time. And I was like, oh, this poor guy. Um,
Yeah. I don't know. Wait, so she was feeding him a picnic, but I think she took him to this meadow thinking just the presence of the flowers would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he falls asleep among the flowers after complaining, I have a headache, the sun's in my eyes. And she eventually has this realization because he's not just changing laying on the flowers, that maybe it's the sap within the flowers that she needs to get to him.
Oh wait, this part I liked because doesn't she hear something inside her head?
Yes, she
And I was
says,
like, "What's up, Kronos?"
it's hard to describe what happened next. A knowledge woke in the depths of my blood. It whispered that the strength of those flowers lay in their sap, which could transform any creature to its truest self. And now the truest self thing is important here because this is literally what Circe says to Odysseus when she changes his men into like pigs and dogs.
Ay,
It's
ay,
like,
ay.
oh, I just brought out what was already in there, which like there's a commentary on men in there, of course. But yeah, so she realizes it's the sap. She it's like this whisper in her head that tells her this is how you have to do it. And so she figures out a way to squeeze some sap into his mouth as he's sleeping and he starts changing. So let's see. Uh Even as I thought that, a shadow moved across his skin. It darkened as I watched. Past brown it went, past purple, spreading like a bruise until his whole body was deepest sea blue. His hands were swelling, his legs, his shoulders. Hairs began to push out from his chin, long and copper green. Where his tunic gaped, I could see blisters forming on his chest. I stared. They were barnacles. So think like Davy Jones almost
Mm-hmm.
from Pirates of the Caribbean, this like sea monster that looks like a monster. And so Aphrodite cursing Circe to fall in love with him in the Greek mythology version is supposed to be an extra punishment because it is a punishment the gods like to use. I'm going to make you fall in love with something that is not human.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one she just genuinely loves him. So he realizes he's changed, and instead of falling for her like she thought would happen and that they'd get to be together and be happy, that he'd find some domain in the sea and they'd get to have their kingdom together, he just goes on this whole popularity tour because nobody knows why he changed. He thinks it's some gift that he must be extra blessed. Everybody else thinks that he must be blessed because they've never heard of a mortal changing in this way. And so he's suddenly popular with all of the immortals and all of the nymphs.
Yeah, this part I wanted to talk about from like an abused person or kid perspective
Yeah.
is that we fantasize a lot. Part of like literally just surviving is you have all these fantastical fantasies that you just imagine, and yeah, most of you know that they're never going to happen, but you just have them anyway. And so I was like, so both of these people are abused kids. And so Cersei doing that is think like basically willing to life the idea that she can, if she turns this human man, the only person that has been nice to her, he's just the first person to be nice to her. And she just is like, I must turn him into a god because if I do, then we'll be like together forever and like and just be wonderful and everything will be perfect and all of my life problems will be gone. Um, and for him, he is suddenly magically turned into a god after being told a lot, likely, that you're not important. And so for him, he's like, oh my God, like they blessed me. Like I must have actually done something really good in my life for the gods to make me one of them. I am important. I am like a good person. I am like worthy of good things. And like one of the things we do a lot with that kind of stuff is we usually fantasize that kind of thing because we're like, there has to be like something that I'll get out of this if I like stay alive. Like the idea is like if I just survive my life, one day I'll grow up and I'll get some sort of like better reward for surviving all of this stuff as like a karmic, gift or whatever. For surviving all of that stuff. And so he's thinking like, yeah, the God saved me from my life where I'm always tired because my dad is horrible. And it gave me like this wonderful gift because I was a good person and they decided that I was important enough
Hmm.
to get this gift. not knowing that it's not them at all, that Circe just literally gave it to her because she just wanted to.
Yeah,
And
because she
just
had a
like,
crush on him.
yeah, and just convinced herself that him being around all the time, like, it's the whole thing of like it brings out like what's already inside. Like, of course he turns into something having to do with water because she, it's like the most simplistic way to look at this stuff is like
Hmm.
she likes the idea of going to like this beach area and talking to him on his boat. And so she turns him into something that has to do with water because she just wants him to keep going to this beach where they can like hang out. That's literally like the farthest that she's thought about it in this version of the story is she just wants to continue to be able to hang out with him at the beach.
Yep.
And so he turns into like a fish related monster thing because that's the only thing she doesn't actually know anything about him. Like, this is the only thing she knows about him is that he fishes in order to make money for his family and that he
Hmm.
has a boat. And so of course he turns into something to do with water because it's literally the only thing she knows about him besides that his dad hits him. That's
Yeah.
literally it. And I'm just like, oh my
Well,
god.
and she sees him having this, like, oh my gosh, I'm so powerful. I must be getting my reward. And she doesn't want to take that away from him at first. She doesn't want to tell people it was her because she loves how proud and happy he is about all of it. And so when she decides to finally take him to meet other sea gods, because he is technically a sea god now, she dresses him up. She says, I chose his clothes in colors that showed his skin to the greatest advantage. She told him like the courtesies that he needs to follow when he's meeting these elder titans. And then she takes him to meet Nereus, Poseidon, her dad, all of the most important people. And one of the things that he starts talking about as he's telling stories of being immortal is what fate happened to his family after that. And
Mm-hmm.
I also want to get your opinion on this one. So he says, I sent a wave to smash my father's boat, and the shock killed him. My mother I blessed. She has a new husband and a slave to help her with her washing. She has built me an altar, and it already smokes. My village hopes I will bring them a good tide.
Yeah, that's relatable
Yeah.
to want to do that to my dad also really liked boats. So like my dad was always looking like permanently looking for a boat until he like physically couldn't like look for a boat anymore. So that was like really funny to read of just imagining like I would it would be really fun to do that kind of thing. Except I like boats too, so I would want to just steal his instead of destroying it. But either way, I enjoyed that part, but I also thought it was interesting that he is talking about like, oh, if like the people from like my hometown basically like give me good things, then maybe I'll help them. And I was just
Yeah, he's already letting it get to his head. We're
like
starting to
that's
see
not
that.
how this is supposed to work. And it's like the whole thing that because he doesn't know that Circe made him like this
Hmm.
because she never actually asked him if he wanted to be a god or
Yeah.
anything like that. He just thinks like, oh, I've been blessed, so I'm actually meant to be here.
Hmm.
And so he's like, I'm among the people that I'm always have supposed to be around.
Yeah.
And those other people from that other place, I don't want to ever think about them because those were like my years of suffering. And now that I've like, it's almost like how you imagine like difficult like backstory or something when you like make up a storyline for a character. Like, oh, those were like the years where I was struggling and stuff, so that when I succeed and I become like the person I'm supposed to be all the time, people feel invested in my story because they saw me go through all that hard stuff. And so he just thinks like, oh, those were the people that I had to suffer around in order to get this gift. And so I just want to leave those people behind because I'm done with them now, right? Like I've moved on to this position I've supposed to be in this entire time. But of course, that's not actually what's going on. And she won't tell him for one reason or another. She won't tell him, and so he's thinking like these are the people I'm supposed to be one of them. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be here if I wasn't one of them. And so he starts playing by all the rules like he wants to because he wants to succeed in this like new world that he feels like he's a part of, which means that he wants to like find somebody that isn't her, or he won't do something good for somebody unless they give him something first, like all the rest of the gods do. And he loses basically all of the qualities that she liked about him.
Yeah, pretty immediately. So she asks him as he's telling this story to the other nymphs and stuff, like, is your dad really dead? And he's like, yeah, of course, he deserved it for his blasphemy, while he's literally polishing a trident he was given by Poseidon. Um, and also, immediately in this conversation is when he reveals, oh, and also there's this nymph I have my eye on. She's really
Hmm.
pretty, right? That round-faced one. And so Circe's like, do you mean Scylla? And yes, Scylla. She moves like water, does she not? Silver as a flowing stream. Circe, I've never been so happy. And so Circe starts feeling possessive at this moment. She's like,
Hmm.
wait a second, he's supposed to be for me. Like, what is going on here? And so after that, she starts noticing Scylla all over the place. Um, what she says about Scylla mostly in her characterization of Scylla is that she sees Scylla as a mean girl who was friends with her siblings that, made her the scapegoat. And yeah, so we're not getting a very good picture of Scylla so far. Let's see.
During this
And
part, I just kept thinking about, like, you're being terrible to this girl. And
yes.
I did not hate Scylla at all because I was just like, you're blaming the girl.
Mhm.
You're blaming the girl for the guy like wanting to be with her. That's not fair. She's just herself. She hasn't
Yeah,
done anything to you personally, especially because nobody else knows that you feel this way because you haven't used your words and told anyone. So
pretty much.
how is anyone supposed to know? Are they supposed to read your mind that like you didn't tell him that you did this thing for him. And so maybe if you did, he would have wanted to be with you because he would have seen how much you care about him. But he
Mhm.
doesn't know that you did that. And so you're like there she's like hoping that he'll like pick her anyway.
Mhm.
And it but it's like you have to like tell people about things or else they're never going to know. And they're going to
Exactly.
like move on with their life and make decisions and think that you're just a really great friend of theirs that they get to be around still now that they've become a god. They're not doing that to like get back at you. They don't know because you've never told them.
Yeah, and another thing, I didn't hit this point when we talked about the first few chapters, but like the opening line of this is her remarking on the word nymph, that there wasn't really a word for what she is. Nymph is also a translation, or it can also be translated bride. And so really the best these nymphs can hope for is that they get a good husband, right? So
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, Scylla is doing nothing wrong here, even as we find out as this goes on, and of course this is from Circe's perspective, that Scylla is starting to get lavish gifts from Glaucus, and she's like, look at these beautiful things that I have. Glaucus says he will empty the sea of them if it would please me, and let's see. Glaucus asked me to marry him. I've not decided yet what I will say. What is your counsel, Circe? Should I take him, blue skin, flippers, and all? So she's not exactly attracted to Glaucus. She's attracted to
Mm-mm.
what Glaucus could bring her, which, like, I don't know. Sometimes with feminism and with being a woman, the best we can do is the best that the system provides. And that's what Scylla's doing here. It's like the best I could do is to marry well. This seems to be a good match. Everybody thinks this guy is the shit because he just turned into a god. He's giving
Mm-hmm.
me all of these gifts. So you can't really blame Scylla for being like this as much as Circe sees her like a mean girl.
Yeah, like Circe sees her as a mean girl because she's like, how dare you not worship at his fins, I guess, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure he has feet anymore. But it's just she's like, you're stealing this man from me and you don't even care about him and you're taking him from me anyway. This is the only person I've had happiness with and you're just taking him from me and you don't even care about it. But it's like she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Like if you really like compare like especially like nymphs who they probably kind of were in like the actual like ancient Greek world, they were probably, human women who at that time, like the thing that you did to have a nicer life was to find a husband that could treat you somewhat well. And so it's like there's nothing wrong with her for wanting that, for wanting to find somebody like that instead of somebody who didn't. Like, yeah, he's a nice guy. He's giving her a lot of gifts. He's going out of his way to make her feel nice. And he seems like a generally nice person. He's just became a god, so that's exciting. Why not give him a chance or whatever, cuz he seems okay. He's not gross like some of the other gods and stuff like that. He seems just fine.
Yeah.
But for her, she's like, how dare you take him from me? And it's like, she doesn't even know she's taking anything from you.
Yeah, like you don't go up to somebody who has a crush on somebody like, what do you think of me dating them? Unless you
Yeah.
don't know. And so, Circe finally starts using her words, but she uses them to her dad to be like, am I allowed to marry Glaucus? And he's like, I'm pretty sure Glaucus already picked. And she's like, okay, but like, can I? and um, let's see. So she eventually goes to Glaucus and asks, do you mean to marry Scylla? And he's like, is she not the most perfect creature you've ever seen? Her ankles are so small and delicate, like the sweetest doe in the forest. The river gods are enraged that she favors me, and I hear even Apollo is jealous. And she says, Glaucus, she is beautiful, yes, but she does not deserve you. She is cruel, and she does not love you as you might be loved. What do you mean? I mean, I know one who will love you better. Who? Um, but I could see him start to understand, his hands lifted as though to ward me off. He who was a towering god, you've been a sister to me, he said. I would be more, I said. I would be all. I pressed my lips to his. He pushed me from him. His face was caught, half in anger, half in a sort of fear. He looked almost like his old self. I have loved you since that first day I saw you sailing, I said. Scylla laughs at your fins and green beard, but I cherished you when there were fish guts on your hands and you wept from your father's cruelty. I helped you when no, he slashed his hand through the air. I will not think on those days. Every hour some new bruise upon me, some new ache, always weary, always burdened and weak. I sit at councils with your father now. I do not have to beg for every scrap. Nymphs clamor for me, and I may choose the best among them, which is Scylla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really not happy with her during this part because she basically sexually assaulted him by kissing him when he clearly didn't want her to kiss him.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That she just kept going like that. And also it's just, yeah, he doesn't it's more the way that she says it is like, you owe me. Like,
Yeah.
I liked you when you weren't anybody. And so now that you are somebody, you owe me and you should get married to me, even when you are telling me that you don't feel that way about me and that you never really felt that way about me. But I'm trying to make you do it anyway because it's what I want. And it's like, that's not fair. Like, you don't do nice things for people in the hopes, and then you don't get to be a nice person and use those things and then come back and use those things as a manipulation tactic later on. Like, you've lost, when you do that, you've lost all credit you have for being just a nice person, because it's like, yeah, if you are being a nice person like that for those reasons, you're not going to use it against them later. You're not going to be like, I was nice to you then when you were struggling, like your dad was beating you and I was nice to you, so you should marry me even though you don't want to. And it's like, could you just not be nice to somebody whose dad is beating them without needing to get something out of it? And it's just, that's kind of how that comes across, to me at least, because it's like, yeah, there are people that I've been nice to in my life that I'm not friends with anymore. I don't sit there and think about how none of them deserved me being nice to them. There are some people that I wish I wasn't around them as long as I was. But when I check up on some people, I'm glad that they're doing okay because I want them to be fine. And I'm not going to be sitting here being vindictive about it just because they're not in my life anymore. I don't
Yeah.
want you to suffer just because of that. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
And
well, and I will say there is a real life equivalent to this that does happen in some relationships, but this isn't wholly the same because they were only friends. Like Circe was only a friend. She never explained I love you and I'm doing all of this because I love you. But there is a trope of men using women to get further ahead, of
Hmm.
like having a woman at home. Like, one thing, this always still pisses me off. So, one of my friends that was a bridesmaid at my wedding, she was working at a chiropractic office when I got married, and Jake had just gotten accepted to chiropractic college. And so, like, she took time off for our wedding, of course, but the chiropractor she worked for said, oh, your friends should watch out because a lot of guys will date somebody through chiropractic college and then dump them when they graduate and marry the next one. Your friend's lucky she's getting married before he starts. Like, yeah.
I know that there are people that do that, like, or the celebrity version of that is somebody is with somebody for a really long time when they're not famous, and then when they become famous, they dump them for somebody much more like famous and younger and prettier or whatever. Um, I know that that kind of stuff happens, and I thought when I was reading this part, I thought it was interesting that this story was not that
Yeah.
because it very easily could have been that, but
Hmm.
it wasn't that because he wasn't the one offering anything. He was, it never even entered his mind that he could actually become a god. He thought he was just like talking to one and like fantasizing the way that like we would joke about something like that. We would never think that it would ever actually happen and there was no chance it ever actually would. And so to him, he's not even considering that that could even be an option. All of the changing into a god came from her. So it's I was like expecting him to do that. Like I was expecting him to like pressure her into changing him into a god and then him like leaving her behind once he did or something. And I was like surprised that he didn't and that it all came from her. And so it was interesting that she could have done that story but just didn't for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. She just didn't.
Yeah. So, she, after this conversation where she finally reveals, I love you, don't marry Scylla, marry me, she starts ruminating on Scylla, and it really does seem like the crux of her opinion on Scylla hinges on the fact that she was friends with her siblings.
Mhm.
Like, basically, I hate you because you're a mean girl, like my brother and sister were mean to me. And she's, of course, using little like jokes that Scylla said here and there about Glaucus's appearance to inform this. Like, how can you not revere him the way that I revere him? Um, but he's blue and has barnacles, like like a coppery. When it coppery green, you think it's like, what do they call it? Like when copper doesn't rust, it gets, what is it called? Starts
I
with a
don't know.
T. I forget, but like when copper turns that greenish color. And so, like, this man has to look crazy, right? But
Yes.
so, like,
This
her remarking on it can't be that weird.
this whole thing with Scylla reminds me of that thing that a lot of I feel like a lot of middle school kids learn at some point or when you're in high school that the people that you see in school that you think have like a perfect life never do. And
Hmm.
like there's always something. Like I remember when I was in 7th grade going through actual literal hell on earth. One of the most popular girls at my school that I was like, her family was super rich. Like the houses in the area that I lived in were over $1 million, and this was in 1999, when they were that much. You had to buy a plot of land back in 1999 that was $500,000 just to buy a house in some of
Hmm.
those subdivisions where her house was. It was a gigantic mansion, and she would like go to Aruba and things like that whenever we would have like vacations from school. And she was really popular at school, and I was like, this girl has no problems and her life is perfect and mine is a horror movie. What is going on? And then in my English class in 7th grade, we had to write a short story about something, and she wrote a story. She in her story she was talking about how her mom died when she was very young from getting dementia at like a very young age. Like her mom got dementia when she was like 30, like right after she was like 2 years old when her mom started getting it. And it's like something that like ran in their family, that a lot of the women in their family would get early onset dementia, and her mom died when she was like 35. from the dementia. And so she was talking about it because that's like one of those things she was afraid of, that one day she would like have kids and the same thing, she would do the same thing to her kids. And I have no idea what this girl's name is, where I could never even like try to look her up and see if she's okay. But that was like that moment for me of realizing like, oh, like just because she seems like she has everything doesn't. I remember coming home and telling my mom that story and being like, everyone has something in their family, like no matter who you are. And my mom was like glad for me to realize that, because that is true. And I feel like that's what this whole chapter is with Scylla, is she looks at her like, oh, she has everything that I want and everything in her life is perfect because she was friends with my siblings that I hated, and the guy that looks like a giant fish will like talk to her, and he doesn't want to, he's not okay with me after I kind of mildly sexually assaulted him, and it's just all the, she is blaming her for everything in her life that isn't right, and not considering that she is her own person, that she has her own life, that she has things probably in her life that she's not happy, like she's a part of this world, she can't be that happy in it. The only thing that can give her safety is marrying this guy that she doesn't really know, that is just a nice guy to her. And so it's like she's living in this world too. She can't be that happy living in this patriarchal setup the same way that Circe is. But none of that stuff like enters her brain at all. She just like keeps going. And I don't know. It was this whole part I was just like, you felt like one thing was taken from you and you're acting so much like the rest of your family. Like,
Pretty much.
and I was just like, why do you hate your family so much when you're like you're doing it? Like this
Yeah.
one guy doesn't want to talk to you and you're like willing to like do some body horror on somebody because you're convinced that they're a horrible person because this guy doesn't want to pay. It's not about her, it's about the guy. And
Yeah.
it's like, why are you taking it out on her? She's not doing anything. And she's just doing that thing a lot of teenage girls do where you like fixate on another girl and just like rip apart them as a person. And I mean, people still do this as adults online. And then when you actually have to interact with that person and you realize that they're like a real living, breathing human being that has like thoughts and feelings, and you're like, oh crap. Like sometimes in like my comment section, people would just be like talking and saying the rudest stuff about me, like, oh, she's so stupid, oh, I know she's so stupid, well, how could she be talking about this way, I don't know what's wrong with her. And I'll be like, hello,
Yep.
I can read you. Like, you're leaving
Yeah.
these on my video, and they'll
Yeah.
be like, oh, we're not talking about it with you. You're leaving them in my video. What do you think is where do you think these comments are going to, the like a magical land where nobody has to read them anymore? Like, I have to read them. And they would be like, why are you deleting my comments? Because you won't shut up. Like,
Yeah.
and you're making me read these things over and over again, calling me mean names because you don't know how to use your brain. Like, what? Like, but it's like that kind of a thing of like, oh. And Circe does do a really good job of never actually interacting with her without making up an entire narrative about her life inside her head first. So she never gets a chance to like realize that what she's told herself about her isn't actually true. I was really hoping that something would happen that would make her, you know, snap out of it or like change her mind or something. And I was just like, oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Circe's whole crash out where she's ruminating on, oh, beautiful Scylla, dainty ankled Scylla. She's having this crash out in the meadow where she changed Glaucus. And that's when she realized, oh yeah, I have these plants that bring out people's truest form. Maybe I should use those on Scylla. And so she comes up with this plan, knowing that Scylla goes to the same pool to bathe midday every day. And she decides, I'm just going to pour as much sap as possible into this pool so that when Scylla goes in it, her true form's going to be revealed. And so, let's see, she says she would not be able to hide her adder malice anymore. All her ugliness would be revealed. And so, what she's picturing is her eyebrows would thicken, her hair would turn dull, and her nose would grow long and snouted. The halls would echo with her furious screams, and the great gods would come with me, but I would welcome them, for every lash upon my skin would only be further proof to Glaucus of my love. It's such a weird crash out. Um,
Yeah, she's literally like, I'm willing to go through physical pain because I've decided that I'm somehow the victim in this situation.
yeah.
Like
And
you are wanting to turn somebody into a monster against their will when they have no idea, when they don't even hardly even know who you are. And she's literally coming up with fantasies in her head that somehow make her still the victim. And I
mhm.
have to be proud and I'm going to go through physical. Why would they do that? Like, why would they do that? And I was
So,
just like, oh my god, you. She's like doing that whole thing that people say of like, main character syndrome.
yes.
Of being like, if I do this, people are gonna come after me because I'm the like the center of everybody's lives, and they're gonna have to beat me, and I'm gonna have to stand like.
Yeah.
Prometheus literally gave humans fire. That's why they did that to him. I don't think this really ranks in the same way.
Yeah, it doesn't like it does, but it doesn't, and we'll talk about that as we get into the next chapter because the next chapter is like the meat of her story. But
Yeah.
like anyways, she's expecting the Furies to come for her after this. She's expecting to fully get punished. Everyone's gonna know it was me. Yet when her aunt Celine comes the moon and tells this story of, oh, so I saw Scylla in this pool and let's see. She
And
says,
like all
you
these
must.
things started coming bursting out of her.
Well, yeah, so first she says, you must understand, I only went to look because the water was so roiled up. I thought perhaps it was some sort of meeting. You know how Scylla is, basically implying that Scylla was having a little rendezvous with some guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Circe's listening to them tell a story, and it says, but she was flailing very strangely, like some sort of drowning cat. Then I cannot say it. She pressed her silvery hand to her mouth. It was a lovely gesture. Everything about my aunt was lovely. A leg, she said, a hideous leg, like a squid's, boneless and covered in slime. It burst from her belly, and another burst beside it, and more until there were 12 all dangling from her. That was only the beginning. She was buckling, her shoulders writhing, her skin turned gray, and her neck began to stretch. From it tore 5 new heads, each filled with a gaping teeth. All the while, she was baying and howling, barking like some wild pack of dogs. It was a relief when she finally dove beneath the waves. And all of the immortals hearing this story are eating it up, like laughing at Scylla's pain, basically like, tell it again, tell it again. And so Celine ends up telling the story again. Meanwhile, nobody really knows that it's Circe. Circe's able to just like kind of quietly skate by. Now, this is where I will tell the entire myth because the way that Ovid lays it out. So, this is from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Both
Mm-hmm.
Glaucus is changing and Scylla's changing. And so, the way that it's told is Glaucus is he's enamored with Scylla. That part is true in the source material as well. But she is not sure how to feel about him. She sees that he looks like a monster and she's a little bit afraid of him. So he decides to tell her the story of how he changed. Now, his story is that he was in a meadow just looking over his catch of the day, like laying it all out on this meadow. But once he laid the fish out on this grass, they all started hopping back to the sea. That's never happened before. And so he got really curious, what is it about this grass, and decided to eat some. And that is what transforms him. So he is not transformed by Circe in source material, he transforms himself. But then he goes to Circe after Scylla hears this story of how he transformed and still runs away, like, I don't want to be with you, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, look, I know that herbs do something because they did something to me, and you are a person well known and renowned for your work with herbs. So, can you use herbs to make Scylla fall in love with me? Now, this is where we find out that Circe's being cursed by Aphrodite, and that's why she has this crush on him. Because that's what Ovid says. He's like, Venus was mad about her affair getting blown up, so she does the thing of like, are you sure you want Scylla? There's much better people out there. What about me? And he's like, no, I want Scylla. And so Circe then decides to poison the pool and In Ovid's version, it's more dog-like the way that she transforms. So I think that Madeline was kind of trying to join the two versions of Scylla, where like we hear the barking references in this one, but she looks like the Scylla that's described in the Odyssey rather than
Mm-hmm.
what Ovid ends up describing. And that's about as much as we get in that one. It's very much a this all happened to Scylla because she dared to say no to a man. And Circe in that case is not acting of her own accord but is
Mm-hmm.
enchanted herself, even having that influence of Aphrodite. And so this Circe, who's extremely jealous, even still is like, I'm glad or wait, no, it's other people she's listening to. I'm glad I never let her have me. She barks. She was always a bitch. Like it's like such a change from the source material, and it's an interesting change to put it all on Circe.
Mm-hmm. I think every day when I read something or you tell me about something new that Ovid wrote, I am continuing to be just so confused that people think that he's misogynistic.
Hmm.
Because his version is much nicer to women. Like he wrote a story where a woman was horribly hurt because of something that like a man essentially did, and that a man wants this stuff, and somehow even though that guy wants to become a god, she's somehow the one that pays the price.
Hmm.
That's a very like feminist sort of, I guess, retelling
Yeah,
if we're
well,
going with how they talk about him. But either
yeah.
way, like the maybe the original feminist retelling, if you're gonna go with that, like probably not. Like a lot, I always have to make this point with how people talk about Ovid, but there's no way that there weren't other stories that people would tell like this during this time, because that's just what people do. Like if we now hear stories in the news or just like stories like this and we imagine like what if this happened instead, or what if they
Hmm.
were really thinking this way or that way or the other way, they were doing the same thing back then too. And so a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff he heard was probably influenced from that kind of stuff, like the same way that like men would the same way that like Rick Riordan changed how he did Medusa in the TV show version to be a victim. It's that kind of a thing of, oh, that story helps women a lot, so I'm going to go write it. That's honestly partly probably where some of the stuff that Ovid did came from.
Hmm.
Is it's just always so confusing that people see him that way
Yeah.
because of
If we
Athena,
want to
I
bring up
guess.
the politics here too,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we can say, oh, because people always make the argument that, like, anytime you make a goddess the bad guy, that it's no longer feminist somehow. Um, but Venus is the one that they were claiming lineage to, the royal, or not the royal family, but like, I mean, no
Mm-hmm.
King's Day, gotta make the allusions to the
Mm-hmm.
Caesars. But yeah, so Julius and Augustus were both claiming that they came from Venus's line. So Venus being the kind of real bad guy in his version of the story, it's a power dynamic thing too, as well as
Yeah.
being, yeah, like this is what happens when a woman says no, plus this is what happens when you piss off the wrong god.
Yeah, like there's a million examples like that. Uh, like we did our second podcast last week. We talked about the whole Zoe Laverne situation, where basically like a young female influencer continues to groom like much like literal children, like 12 and 13-year olds when she was like 19, 20, 21, like around those ages. And it would be like if somebody came up to us and said that we weren't feminists for
Hmm.
talking about the things that she did because she harmed boys and that she's a girl. Like that's the most
It's
white
stupid.
feminist, not utter malarkey that people say. That's why people laugh about, like, I call it Taylor Swift feminism, how the only time that she'll talk about like women's rights is when a man is being mean to her specifically. But like other than that, if it's literally anyone else but her, she never says anything. It's like that's what that sounds like, to be like, oh, Ovid is misogynistic because the person in his story that was the bad one is a woman. It's like, yeah, a woman that's a all powerful god
Hmm.
that has completely like domination and control over any other human man she would ever run into. Like the power dynamics there are totally off. Like Connor, a 12, 13-year-old little Connor doesn't have more power in a situation with a 19, 20-year-old Zoe Laverne because of obvious reasons. Like, you sound silly saying that stuff out loud and expecting me to believe it and not be like, are you sure? And like, are you sure? But then the other part, when you told me about how the myth happens in the actual thing, I was just so like confused, I guess, about why she changed it this way. And like, it's obviously early on, like even at the end of chapter 6, you're still kind of, you haven't seen completely the consequences of her actions completely. Like,
Yeah.
they tell her what they are, but you haven't seen them actually like transpire and how she feels about them. And so I could feel differently about this later on. But it's just kind of odd that that Madeline Miller wrote this story where she changed it, where everything is Circe's fault.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, that's so much. Like, I don't know if she felt like she needed to make everything somehow her fault to just like really, really, really make it obvious that she's the scapegoat in a super intense way, thinking that she had to like kind of literally hit her over the head with it almost to get her to like accept the fact that she's never going to fit into her family, to like leave it all behind basically, or something. Like, I don't know if that's where she felt like she had to like be really hurtful honestly about it all and make it all her fault, because without it maybe she wouldn't have decided to leave, or maybe she would have changed her mind, or maybe she would have wanted to do something to try to please her family later or something like that. And at the end of this chapter, she very much writes her as someone who's leaving, like fitting into the family, like behind essentially. I don't know if that's why she wrote it that way, but it just, I don't know how to feel about it, because I'm like, this is like way over the top. And I know that this sort of thing obviously happens to women. Like, duh, of course I know that. But I know that sometimes we do things like this, not really thinking about it, that end up blowing up in our faces. And then we get punished for it in a way that's harsher than maybe other people would, especially if you have like a conscience and things like that. But and then you doing this thing that you think is the right thing when you're not like calming down leads to like some sort of consequence later that you could never possibly foresee. Like, bad things happen to Circe when she's on that island by herself when she gets exiled. And so it's like, I know that those things happen, and that's part of why there's so much victim, like inner like victim blaming. Like, you blame yourself for the things that you did, of like, if I wouldn't have just done this thing or said that thing or whatever, maybe they wouldn't have been mad at me today. Like, maybe I mean, I'll be honest that I probably don't like this the most because I did that with myself all the time. Like, I used to tell myself for like years that the reason why my dad was doing that stuff to me was because I was doing something wrong and I was being punished. And I'm pretty sure that he told me that he was like punishing me. And like, one of the ways I tried to tell my mom before she really understood what I was saying was because when something would happen that would make him upset, I would be like, Dad's gonna like be upset. And I would be like panicking about it. And she would understand, because I thought that's what that was. That if I did something wrong that day, he would do that as like a way to get, because I did something wrong and I needed to be like punished for it. And so whenever that kind of thing would happen, I would sit there and try to figure out what I did wrong so that I wouldn't do it anymore. And I could never figure it out because that's not actually why that was happening. But that was
Yeah.
like the way that's likely what he told me. And that's also just the way that I like rationalized it, to feel like I had some sort of like control over what was going on. Is like, oh, if I can just figure out what I'm doing that's making him so upset, then maybe it will stop. And that was like the thing that I needed to believe, was that it would one day stop, and that was my way of doing that. And so I know that this is something that a lot of victims do, but I don't like having to read it. I just don't like knowing what's going to happen, a little bit of what happens in this book just from reading the trigger warnings. I know that bad things happen to her throughout the course of this book, and the way that the story is set up, it's like set up in a way where she is going to blame herself for it.
Hmm.
And maybe she doesn't. Like, maybe the story goes a different route. Like, maybe Madeline Miller didn't have like a, a child abuse like person like me like read her story to tell her like what we're like in this sort of way, and so she wrote it in a different way. But either way, I'm just like, it's so confusing to me that the myth like lets some of the things not be directly her fault, but she instead changed it to make everything her fault.
Yeah.
um and it's one of those weird things of like you're changing it to basically make her be like the person her family thinks they are, and it's like I'm not sure she needs to be punished this badly for kind of acting like her family for a bit there with this guy. Like, yeah, she was not listening to him, and she was not asking him for consent. She was not listening to him. She was not treating him like like a person. Like he had his own opinions and his own mind and his own life. She definitely was like just trying to do what she wanted and not considering what anybody else wanted in the moment. But I'm not sure that she needed to be punished this badly in the overall narrative of the story. And like maybe later on I'll feel differently about that because it will turn into something else that I'll enjoy more. But at least for right now, I'm just like, God, it felt unnecessarily harsh knowing that there was like another option. Like I didn't feel
Yeah.
like that reading it because I didn't know the actual myth until you told me. And so after
Yeah.
I found that, I was just like, wow, that feels really mean.
Yeah, so to have her be responsible for both Glaucus's transformation and Scylla's transformation in such a selfish way is such a huge change. Like, if she had kept it that she just transformed Scylla and that Glaucus found whatever herbs changed him on his own, it would be a lot easier to sit with this kind of, I don't know, to sit with Circe doing this, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because then it's like, okay, he decided that he wanted to become a god. And so her being upset that now that he is a god, that he doesn't want to spend time with her, I could understand where that like vindictiveness was coming from
Hmm.
because, this guy was saying like, oh, if only I was one of you, then we could just keep hanging out like this. And then he becomes one of them and then he doesn't want to hang out with her anymore. I could understand where that anger would come from with her, but when it is like her that turned him into that in the first place, it feels like what you were just saying with like the power disparity of things.
Hmm.
It's just like very off. Like she's this very, even if she doesn't see herself that way because of how her siblings and parent and mom especially treats her, like she is a very powerful god. And so the fact that she just like found some flowers and was able to just turn him into a god, it's just like she has all of the power in that situation. And so it doesn't feel good seeing her use that power to turn Scylla into that just to get back at him, because it's
Yeah.
like those people are just kind of, it's like the what people always say about the gods in like a negative way. That wasn't what Circe usually is like they just play with people's lives when their emotions get like a little bit hurt, like a little kid would almost. And that's what she feels like in this thing. She's like upended these two people's lives completely for good. And especially when in this chapter, I think it is, where they're going through how nothing can like change her back.
Hmm.
That there's no way to like fix what happened to her. She's just like that forever.
Yeah.
And so it's like this very impulsive thing that you thought when you were just angry and didn't like slow down enough to think has permanently just altered the entire course of her life.
Hmm.
Just because of this very tiny thing that she did that in the overall course of her life doesn't really mean anything. Like the hardest part of this chapter for me was reading the parts of everyone like laughing at Scylla
Yes, yeah,
and
because that's what we hear about after is basically Circe says all of her cousins are sitting there talking crap, like, oh, Scylla used to sleep with everybody, and like,
yeah.
oh, it's funny she turned into this weird dog serpent thing, and like they have to basically take Glaucus off to the side to tell him what happened because everybody else is laughing it up and happy that this happened. And Helios is the one who ends up telling him and pulls him to the side, probably realizing this dude's gonna be heartbroken.
Mhm. And he's just like, can it be fixed? And Helios is like, no. And it's like, okay, I guess. And Helios gives him like some advice about who he could try to marry instead. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, I guess I'll do that. But all of the like slut shaming comments, There is one thing you can say about Madeline Miller's writing when it comes to like the, I guess, what she wants you to think. It
Hmm.
is so obvious.
Yes.
Like some writers do like kind of, they tell like a general theme throughout their stories, and they
Hmm.
kind of, they make the theme keep popping up, like to like plug a future thing we're gonna do. We are gonna do an episode where we just go through all of the references to all the heroes in Percy Jackson, the Olympians, because book one is Perseus, book two is Odysseus, book three is Heracles, book four is what's his name, Theseus,
Hmm.
and book five is Achilles. And when you realize that and you actually know about, there are there's constant references
Hmm.
to every one of those heroes in those stories. It's just like never ending of
Yeah.
how many there are, because that he did that on purpose. But he doesn't like hit you over the head with it. He like he kind of puts them there, and if
Hmm.
you go back as you get older and read them, you realize what he's doing. But he doesn't like make it super like, he doesn't like have a character in the literal story tell you like Zoe Nightshade doesn't come up to Percy and is like, Luke is torturing Annabeth the same way that Heracles used me,
Yeah.
and you being nice to this like mystical sea cow is the opposite of how those heroes happen. So thank you for help. Like
Yeah.
nothing like that happens, even though that's what's happening in those stories when you actually like think about it and know about what kind of what he's going for. But like with Madeline Miller, she just like really, really, really wants you to know.
Yeah.
And I realized when I was reading this, so I was like, this is probably why she's such a popular like author with kind of like the general public when it comes to like Greek retellings,
Hmm.
because very, very much right away you know exactly what like kind of like narrative or story, whatever she's going for, no matter what it is. Like in this story, it's very obvious that it's about the patriarchy and about women trying to succeed in the patriarchy and not being able to. Like you
Hmm.
could not make it like more clear with Scylla that she's talking about how women are always like slut shamed and
Yeah.
just always treated, even like she was like a popular girl. Like everyone was nice to her before.
Hmm.
Everyone liked her. Everyone talked about how beautiful she was. But now that this horrifying thing happened to her, she's a joke. Everyone's making fun of her. Everyone's laughing at her. And so it's like no matter how much like privilege or like position you have in a patriarchal world, it's never good enough, because you do one thing wrong and it all goes like tumbling down and disappears on you.
Yeah. It
And I'm
makes
like,
me think of
okay,
Britney
I get
Spears.
it. Like, I
Yeah.
get it. This is so obvious. Oh my
I-
God.
It makes me think of how people turned on Britney Spears because,
Yeah.
like, if you were alive for her 2007 meltdown, when she like was fed up and she shaved her head in public, everybody ate that shit up.
Hmm.
Everybody ate it up.
Well,
Everybody
it's
made jokes about it.
there's like endless stories just within the last 2 weeks about things like that. Like in the last year, Chapel Roan,
Hmm.
what is wrong with people? Like they went from loving her music, and then she makes a video being like, "Hey, don't sexually harass me when I'm in the street. Like don't come up to me and kiss me without me asking when I'm in a bar or whatever." Like very obvious things. Just like she just made a video on TikTok asking people to respect like that she's a person, she has boundaries, and to not treat her like she's not a human being. And
Yeah.
people just turned on her. And ever since then, because she just asked for the smallest thing, every time she talks, people find something wrong with what she said. There's nothing wrong with what she said. Like the
Hmm.
fact that she in an interview made a joke about how her friends that had kids when they were too young, and they don't, and they are trying to like figure it out, aren't happy, and so that's why she doesn't like the idea of having kids when she's 26. Like she's a fucking baby still. And
Hmm.
so like it's fine if she says that. She was joking when she said it. Like she very obviously was being sarcastic about it. The way that she said it was meant to be a joke in some sort of a way. Like she wasn't being serious that her friends actually want to go die somewhere because they had kids at a young age, but she's just saying like, no, I don't want to do that. None of them seem that happy, and that's not what I want in my life.
Hmm.
She just answered it as a joke, and people have been still ripping her apart. I saw a video like 2 days ago of people trying to say that Chappell Roan is secretly Republican. The person who became she has drag queens open for her
Yeah,
on her
like
tour.
it's
Her
very clear she still has people like that in her family, so she might not speak against it in the way that people like, but
But
like
she's
yeah.
the thing that she said that made people so mad during like the election cycle was essentially, I'm not going to endorse Kamala because I don't want to endorse somebody that might end up doing something later that I would regret because they're a political person in power. Like, you never know. And so
Mhm.
you don't want to be that person that like told somebody like, I'm putting like my name and my entire brand and identity behind this person when I'm not sure about that. She never said
Yeah.
like, don't vote for her. She just said like, I can't endorse her because that's a big decision to do that. That is a really big decision. People should take that really seriously. And she was like, I don't know what kind of president she would be. And so I don't want to say that. And then a couple years down the line, things are happening that people aren't happy with. And they look back to me and feel like I influenced them to do that when I'm not educated enough about this to feel like me, like a 25-year-old pop star, should be giving people like political advice.
Yeah.
That's a very rational way to look at things, and people have like ripped her apart. People are ripping apart Sabrina Carpenter for just existing right now. They're trying so hard to find something wrong with everything she does. It's ludicrous. I have never seen so many people bring up Lolita in my life, and the fact that none of them are actual child sex abuse victims should give you pause. That
Yeah.
all of the people being like, oh, Sabrina Carpenter should be hashtag canceled because she did a thing like inspired by Lolita. And I'm like, yeah, but like, what is she trying to say about that? And like her doing pictures in like that sort of like inspired by that doesn't tell me anything. This is art. She's making art. I want to know what is the point she's trying to make by bringing up those images. What is she trying to say? None of you know what she's trying to say because you're just doing overlays of the pictures and using the fact that they exist at all as a way to say that she's a bad person. That doesn't tell me anything. I need
Yeah.
to know what she's trying. We don't know what she's trying to say yet because the album that she's making isn't even out yet. And all of you decided what she's saying without even asking her, like, what is going on? And it's those sort of things happen all the time. Going back to like the one I remember the most that I feel like is um, one of the worst when it comes to like the public, Monica Lewinsky.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
happened when I was like
I was
12.
like a literal child, so I was
Yeah, I
not
was like
old
12,
enough
I
to
think.
participate in it at the time.
I think
But
that
like I remember
happened.
people joking about it.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
think that,
remember seeing jokes about the dress when I was too young to understand what they were referencing.
yeah, because my life is sad. I knew what they were referencing. And I really didn't like it that I knew what they were, that they people were like bringing it up all the time. And I remember like extremely vividly, which is rare for that time in my life when all that stuff was going on. I can remember like really identifying with her and not understanding why everybody was being so hard on her. And like seeing all the jokes, like endless jokes about her for years by like all of the late night TV people, and
Hmm.
just not, and being like, why are you saying that about her? Like, he's the president. Like, why
Yeah.
is that, like, why is she the one? Like, she was 23. And like even like 12-year-old me going through like the horrors of my life at the time, I was like, yeah, why is everybody ganging up on her? I was like really glad in the last few years or so where people actually realized how horrifying that was, that a 23-year-old intern was doing that with the president, and they somehow blamed her completely for it and acted like she was this femme fatale woman and like made all these jokes about that whole dress situation. And I was like, he he's the president. Do you
Yeah.
really think that she could tell him, no, I don't feel like it? Like, of course not. He's the fucking president. Like, will like anyone get a grip? Like the fact that like that became like an impeachment was, oh my god. Like I
Yeah.
can like remember my mom just seeing it on TV and just start screaming about how mad she was that people were even like wasting their time doing that. Like the Congress has literally wasted everyone's time since then. They've never done a single thing. That's what this stuff reminded me of, is that like somehow Scylla just being like a nice looking girl, which is what all of these gods say they should aspire to be, is now being used against her when somebody else has turned her into a monster because somebody else just thinks that she's pretty. That's literally
Yeah.
all she did. They think that she's pretty. And I was like, this is making me really depressed remembering the Odyssey right now, that that's like what she has to live her life like. That the only happiness she gets is killing, you know, sailors because somebody turned her into that.
Yeah, well, and Ovid put that in his story of the reason she went after Odysseus's crew was to get back at Circe since she liked Odysseus.
That
Um,
makes sense.
yeah, but anyways, back to the story. Yeah, Glaucus moving on from this is not like let me have Circe. You know, that is not the result of her little trick here. What happens is, so he asks, can she not be changed back, as you said? And every god born knows the answer from their swaddles. No, my father said, no god may undo what is done by the fates or another god. Yet these halls have 1,000 beauties, each as ripe as the next. Look to them instead. And you know, he's not looking at Circe. He's like, I understand. It's a shame. Nereus's youngest is fair. What's her name? Thetis. So Achilles' mom is the
War
next
flashbacks,
person.
a song of Achilles Thetis. I was like, God,
Yes.
no, not her again.
And if you know the mythology for this one, Thetis is off limits. Thetis is fated to have a son stronger than his father, so he cannot be with a god, or she cannot be with a god. And yeah, so what was it? So Circe says, as they're having this conversation, I still hoped Glaucus would think of me. I would have married him in a moment, but I found myself hoping for another thing too, which I would not have believed the day before, that he would weep all the salt in his veins for Scylla's return, holding fast to her as his one true love. So she is really crashing out here over this whole unrequited love thing.
She's trying to
Um,
like, I think that's her trying to justify what she did. That like the idea that she turned Scylla into that and he doesn't even care that much about her and will just move on. It's like, then why did I do that to her? And
mhm.
so she like wants him to be really upset and be like grieving her, because then it's like, well, at least I did it. At least he actually cares about her. When he, like, they were just, they're like like the thing that you can compare them to is like they're like teenagers about to go out on their first date.
Mhm.
That's like basically how he felt about her, and she's like, you must die forever.
Yeah. And so she realizes through all of this, Glaucus is no better than all of the other gods. That, like, she thinks that he's the same as them. And eventually, after they kind of stop interacting, she has this realization. What would my uncle Prometheus say? What would he say about, like, all of the gods being the same? He would say, what would they not do? And so that inspires her to basically pull a Prometheus, what we found out he did, where he rightfully, like, or he, with courage, went to Zeus and is like, I defied you, I did this thing, and then he takes his punishment. So she decides to tell her dad, hey, I was the one who changed Glaucus, and I was also the one who changed Scylla. I did it because I was mad. Um, and he's like, you couldn't have done that. No child such as you could have done that. And like very much being like, if any of my children are going to do something amazing and fantastical, it wouldn't have been you.
And I also like this part was interesting because like the other people that were there besides her dad,
Hmm.
like back them up of like, no, I wouldn't have told you where those flowers were if I thought you could actually like do something that might harm somebody.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have sent you after doing that if you could actually do something like that.
Yeah.
Like, no, you weren't the one. Like during this whole part where they're telling her like, no, it's impossible for you to have done it, and she keeps thinking that it was her, and she finally, I think, kind of starts to believe them at the end. um
I don't
I
think
was
she
going
believes them. That's the thing. But yeah.
I think she was at least trying to, like the idea of like maybe something just happened to them and it wasn't just me that made it happen kind of thing. Um, but I was going back and forth during this whole part of like, I want them to be right. I'm like, I don't think that they're right. Like, I think that she actually did it. And I think that they just think there's no way that, because all of these gods are very powerful, and they just think there's no way that I couldn't know about something. Like, the idea that there's something going on in the world that they don't have any knowledge of. They're just like, it's impossible for you to somehow stumbled into something that I wasn't aware of first. And
Yeah.
so I was like, they're probably wrong, but I really want them to be right because I don't want her to have like done this. I don't want her to be the one that did this. And so I was hoping that during that whole back and forth part that they somehow would be right, even if I didn't think that it was, because it didn't really make sense in like the overall narrative of the story for it not to be her. But I was just hoping that it would, just so she could somehow get out of this situation without, destroying her whole life. Basically,
Yeah.
I just was hoping that she could somehow walk away from it without all of this happening. But then um, her brother comes home.
Well, yeah, so first of all, her dad getting mad at her. I think she needed this to break that final tie to her family because she really did think her dad, I mean, he was literally the sunshine, right?
My
But she
dad will
also,
protect me if I'm in danger.
exactly. And so he has this whole conversation with him where she's like, I did it. I said I did it. I have this power. And he's like, you're contradicting me. What he tells her, he says, worst of my children, faded and broken, whom I cannot pay a husband to take. Since you were born, I pitied you and allowed you to have license, yet you grow disobedient and proud. Will you make me hate you more? And he decides to punish her as she's like challenging him by burning her, like because he's the literal sun, so he uses his sun power to scorch her. And she finally has a moment, she's like, no, no, it wasn't me, I'm sorry, I was wrong to believe I did that. And she's left basically crying and goes back to the area with the meadow, to go lick her own wounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to know how dissociation works, I forgot that happened.
Yeah.
Like I read that and then I was like, "Oh, these chapters don't have any trigger warnings." Because I read that and forgot that happened.
Oh yeah.
Because that's physical abuse.
Hmm.
And without you telling me, I would have like not remembered that and not put that on my little trigger warning guide that I'm making. Um,
Yeah, I was like, wait, are there not any huge triggers for this one? I probably should have reminded you. But also, yeah, so she's like sitting in the meadow after this happens. She regenerates slowly than the rest of the gods for some reason, so she's waiting for her wounds to slowly get better. And she eventually realizes if I stay out in this meadow too long, my Aunt Celine is going to rise ahead of me. And although this meadow is guarded from my dad, it's not guarded from her. And I don't want anyone to find me. So she ends up returning.
mhm.
She also, before she returns, she has a thought, maybe I should eat these herbs and just let whatever is going to happen happen. But she doesn't do it at this point.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
now it's interesting because now she's seeing them like she should the whole time, like being like, "Oh, they're watching me all the time." And it's like, "Yeah, they've always been watching you."
mhm.
I'm glad that you're like on the right page now that he actually physically hurt you. I don't know if he never did that before or something in her life. She doesn't really say that he never did. Um, but I guess that could be true. That was
Yeah.
like the first time that he actually went that far. Um, and did something like that to her, but it's just like, oh God, like why did it
Yeah.
take you so long to
Yeah.
realize that they're watching you all the time, and not in a way that's good because they don't say anything good to you when they're watching you.
So she's eventually found and she's told, your brother's here, you're summoned. And so it's Aedes. Aedes, her little brother who she helped raise, who she's a little boy mom for. Um, she finds out he's here and he's the one who finally tells the dad, actually, you know what? Circe did do that. We all have this power. Um, let's see. So he says, In my kingdom of Colchis, I've done such things and more, much more, called milk out of the earth, bewitched men's senses, shaped warriors from dust, which that is a Medea reference, as is
Mm-hmm.
I've summoned dragons to draw my chariot.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes me think Aedes is going to be a part of the story later on as well. Um, but he tells him pharmakia, such the art is called, for they deal in pharmaca, those herbs with power to work changes upon the world, both those sprung from the blood of gods, as well as those which grow common upon the earth. It is a gift to be able to draw out their powers, and I am not alone in possessing it. In Crete, Pasiphae rules with her poison, and in Babylon, Perse conjures souls into flesh again. Circe is the last and makes the proof.
Mm-hmm.
And before this, all of them had thought um, that the children from this god coupling, from Perses and from Perseus, I always forget, like the names are too close. Perses,
Mm-hmm.
Perseus, Percy, whatever she's called. But the mom and Helios, they had thought that their children just weren't that powerful before this, and that if they were powerful, Aedes seems to be the most powerful of them. But this is kind of like finally the proof of like, yeah, they actually are powerful. Their power is sorcery, it's witchcraft, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I thought the part of that I liked was how her dad obviously had absolutely no idea. Like the way that Helios reacts is he just like stares at him when he says that and doesn't say anything for a couple seconds. And
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, he wasn't lying to Circe. He legitimately did not think it was possible for her to do something like that. And it just shows like how it must be very hard to surprise a god. Um,
exactly.
but he was absolutely shocked.
Yeah, so Aedes gives a demonstration, and his demonstration is to finish healing some of the wounds that Circe has from being scorched.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what he says about Pharmakia is um, he says, those are the least of my powers. They are drawn from the earth itself and so are not bound by the normal laws of divinity. I understand, of course, that you can make no judgments now. You must take counsel. But you should know that I'd be happy to give Zeus a more impressive demonstration. Yeah.
I'm just laughing because it's such like a boss move
Yes.
to go home and be like, "Hey, you never noticed that your children have this crazy power that you didn't think could possibly exist. If you need me to show off for Zeus later, I can do that for you." And his
Yeah.
dad is just like, "What am I doing? Like, what is going on?"
Yeah. Um, so Helios's response to this is like, yeah, we got to make a meeting and try to talk this out because something like this has never happened. We'd never heard of it. We have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what to do about it. And so then Aedes and Circe get to talking. Um, as because they're told like, don't move. We don't want you guys doing anything else until we figure out what to do with you. And just like one mythological thing that so she asks him how is Colchis, basically. Like they're catching up because he's literally been gone since the day of Pasiphae's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she asks him, do you have Daedalus too? No, Pasiphae has him trapped, perhaps in time. I have a giant fleece made of gold, though, and half a dozen dragons. So the Golden Fleece, that story we've gone
Mm-hmm.
over for Percy Jackson reasons, but it is like the one thing of power he has in his area. It's in a grove of Ares in Colchis. But yeah, she asks him, okay, how did you learn this? Will you teach it to me? And he says, sorcery cannot be caught. You find it within yourself or you do not. Um, and so she realizes that the whisperers she heard from the plants, the humming she hears from plants, that is her intuition on this
Mm-hmm.
sorcery. That is the way she's supposed to access this power, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like that the power is talked about in this way because when you think of plants, have you ever read Clan of the Cave Bear?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I don't think you would. Don't read it, but like, because there is sexual assault within it. That is really hard to read. But one of the things that happens, it's the story of like before humans were humans, so there's part cavemen and then there's part like humans, right?
Hmm.
And so there's this little girl who gets separated from her family that's human like us, but cavemen find her. And so she ends up getting raised by them, and particularly raised by their medicine woman and by their priest. And the way that she describes the medicine woman figuring things out is she literally she'll go to plants, she'll like chew on some and try to see, is it making my tongue numb? Is like, what effects does it have?
Hmm.
If it has too bitter of a taste, she spits it out immediately. She'll put it on her skin and test it out that way. That's kind of what it made me think of, and that's probably how a lot of our indigenous ancestors did learn how to work with the land, was like, I'm going to actually test these things on myself and then use them in medicinal ways on other people. So
Hmm.
she kind of has to go through her own process of that.
Yeah, and I do like that because that is like spirituality stuff gets really freaking weird,
Hmm.
um, especially in the last however many years with white supremacy being in it. But when it really gets down to like the core of what it is just like learning how to listen to like your intuition more when you're
Hmm.
just making decisions or like living your life instead of disregarding them, like listening to those little nudges even if you don't know why you get them, and just trusting that I want to try this instead. And also knowing like if it doesn't work out, there's nothing wrong with what you did. You just are trying something new.
Hmm.
And that being fine. That's like what spirituality is supposed to be without people putting a lot of really weird rules on something that's not supposed to have rules because it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, that's all that's supposed to be. It's weird to have watched that happen recent times. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, either way, the conversation with her brother is really interesting because he's like, "What took you so long?" And then he's also just like she's just like reeling from everything that's happening. And the thing I liked that he brought up, even if it's like him being a jerk, like an ass, but it still is just like thank you for somebody being like overly logical around Circe right now because she's like living in like fantasy land honestly and isn't very like grounded in real life,
Hmm.
is when he's like, did you really think that when she's talking about like why she didn't want to believe that she really did it
Hmm.
and that it was really her that turned those people into those things? And she's like, oh, I just like brought out what was inside of them all the time. And he's like, and the stuff that was inside of them just like happened to match what you think of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, really? And it's like, really? And it's like, yeah, really? Like, really? Like, you really believe that like Scylla had like heads like and like crazy like arms and tentacles like just hidden inside of her because she was an attractive girl? Like is it like just like a funny coincidence that the girl that you are mad at turns into an ugly, horrible, monstrous being, and that the guy that you knew from being a fisherman turns into something associated with water? Like, duh. Like they turn into
Yeah.
that stuff because that's what you think of them. Other people would think differently of those same people, but it's just one of those things of like the idea that like she could somehow know what this person is really like on the inside, and that like, oh, obviously the things that's coming out of them now is just like what was always in there because I'm right about them. And it's like, this is literally your magic. You're telling yourself that you're right about how you feel about them because of the things that you're turning them into. Like it reminds me of like what she does later on with like turning men into pigs, or in Percy Jackson, Cece turning like
Hmm.
all of the men into hamsters and turning Percy into one. Like he's a precious little 13-year-old boy that like loves his mother more than anyone else and is like the most woke little 13-year-old child about like gender rules and things like that. He is the last person on earth that would ever hurt any woman in that sort of a way, and she turns him into one anyway and has to convince him to take it because he doesn't actually want to. Like he's proving that like her whole analysis wrong about men by not wanting to take this potion that's supposed to turn him into a more attractive version of himself. But
Yeah.
she's like trying to force him to take it anyway so that he can be who she wants him to be. And it's like that general thing that she's still doing of like, oh, it's just so interesting that the people that you think are bad are somehow have these horrible things inside of them, and like you casting like complicated spells on them have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, well, and I have to say, like, part of me for a second did see Cersei's way because I'm like, but maybe Aedes just thinks it's like this because he's baleful minded. You know, he
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
destructive minded. That's the way he's literally described in mythology. And so he is kind of a more malevolent person compared to Circe. But yeah, at the same time, it's like you can't say that every single man she ever transformed, every single person she ever transformed truly has this within themselves. So there
Yeah.
has to be some sort of intentionality behind it.
It reminds me of whenever there's like somebody in the public eye, especially like an influencer, if there's some like rumor about them, even if it's like some person on Reddit that has like no credentials and is just literally making something up.
Hmm.
And people always be like, I always had an off feeling about that person. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like you're
Yeah.
just saying this now because you heard this story about them. Like, yes, sometimes I do actually have those things about people, but they're based in something like real because
Yeah.
they've done something that concerns me. Like the best example I know of the last couple months is that if anything horrible ever comes out about Ryan Reynolds, I will be like actually screaming
Yeah.
about it because but I base that on actual real things. Like, oh, he like hit like a 15-year-old child in a scene when he wasn't supposed to, and like didn't, and like they put that scene into the movie.
Yeah.
And the things that he just says and the way that he treats other like actors and things like that on set is why I base those things on, and the fact that his whole persona is always fake, like he's talking with like a fake voice and things like that. He's always playing like a role. He's never just like being himself because he's always playing this like over dramatic part of like Ryan Reynolds. He's basically always being Deadpool. And
Yes.
like that's why I wonder about him, because when you're always playing a part, I just have to wonder like, why are you pretending all the time? Like what are you trying to hide where you can like never drop the facade ever? And so like that's what makes me worry about him, not just because I feel like he has a weird thing about him in that sort of way or something. It's like based on
Yeah.
something that I have noticed that I've seen in patterns of behavior with other people that I've met in my life that I know is like usually something to be concerned about. But like that's not Cersei. Cersei's just like, oh, I had a bad feeling about this girl, and I'm like, is it that you're jealous of her because she's pretty and everybody likes her? Is that the bad
That's the bad
feeling?
feeling.
Is
Yeah.
that the bad feeling? Because that's not exactly valid. Like it
Yeah.
is valid in the moment if you want to feel that, but it's not valid to convince yourself that there were like multiple heads and like tentacles inside of her body this entire time.
Yeah, and you just brought them out.
Yeah.
So the Titans and the gods are meeting, and Aedes says pretty pointedly how they have to play this off. Um, so his worry is over Zeus. He must paint us just right, that we are a threat enough that Zeus should think twice, but not so much that he is forced to act.
Let's
And
not
yeah,
have you all be smited where you stand.
yeah, so the power dynamics between God and Titan are always kind of at play in this story, which is interesting considering, again, I think I said this last episode that we talked about Circe, but that Circe's a generation removed from the Titan War, it seems. So the fact that it still keeps creeping up kind of in the politics of the divinities, kind of interesting.
Yeah, and honestly, what he said reminds me of like power dynamics for all time. That
Hmm.
every like anyone who's trying to like gain anything good in their life, that's what we're trying to do, is like trying to show them that you can't just get rid of us, but also not be so much of a threat that they do anything super violent towards us that we can't come back from. There's just always constantly those balancing acts from all kinds of people,
Yeah.
in lots of positions all over the world that are just trying to like have somebody with more power respect them enough where they do what they want, but also not be so scary that they just take them out instead. And granted, like the dad is successful because he comes back and they're not going to be smited by
Yeah.
Zeus. Like Zeus isn't going to kill them. He is successful um at getting him to agree to that.
Yes.
Um
Well, before we move on from Scylla, there was there was one thing he said about when they were having that conversation of, oh, you did this to her. This wasn't something you brought out of her. He says, well, I'm thankful it happened the way that it did because at least it's a good punishment. Like, had she just become ugly like you wanted her to, that description she gave with like thick eyebrows, long nose, all of those feature changes,
mhm.
then she would have absolutely nothing. A nymph already is a low place to be on the totem pole, but if she was an ugly nymph, she'd be even lower. So at least as a monster, she still can retain some power.
Mhm.
And it's a weird way to look at what happened to her.
Yeah. And it honestly is, but the thing I have said this to you about him is Aedes is somebody that he just knows how the rules of this world work.
Hmm.
And so he just knows how what to do in order to like survive in this world. And so for him, he's like this world is all about power
Hmm.
and how to like gain some of that for yourself. That's what everyone is trying to do. And so he
Hmm.
looks at it and he's like, well, at least she's like something fearful. Like people are afraid of her. She could hurt people and things like that. And so she still has something about her that is unique and different than everybody else in an polar opposite way than it used to be. But at least she still has some sort of power still that she can try to like wield in ways against other people. If she was just like he said, if she was just ugly, she wouldn't have any power. And
Hmm.
so like I generally am like, yeah, he's always right about whatever he says because he understands that the only thing that anyone cares about in this world is power and how you can use the power that you have to make like moves to get what you want without like upturning things too much. And so that's a way for her to do that still, even if she's in this horrible position now where she's like a literal monster. If she
Hmm.
was still a human being, she wouldn't have any of that anymore. And so at
Yeah.
least she has something. Like, even though Circe accidentally gave her something, um, it is true that at least she has something. She's still known as this, like, very scary thing.
Hmm.
Like, thousands of years later, if she was just turned into somebody who was really ugly, no one would ever think about her ever again. So at least
Yeah.
she has something to hang on to, but it's still just, like, hardly anything good.
Yeah. So, it takes them 2 nights to come to a decision of what to do with the children. And so when they emerged, their faces were set and grim. And I underlined this because it's almost the same way she describes Glaucus coming back to her that day when his dad beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Like the face set and grim. So we kind of automatically know something bad is going to happen whenever she's like, uh oh, the men look a little too grim.
Yeah. Like, oh
Yeah.
no, what does that mean?
Let's see. So, hold on, let me see. Um, from the die, my grandfather stared out at all of us, his cup empty in his hand. My mother was boasting among her sisters. Perseus and Pasiphae were the first, or sorry, were the ones who knew first, of course. Is it any wonder that Circe is last? I plan to have 100 more, and they will make me a silver boat that flies through the clouds. We will rule upon Olympus. So, narcissist mom strikes again as soon as she figures out, like, I can use my children for something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but what ends up happening is that oh wait, before we get to what the actual like outcome of the meeting is, she does see Glaucus again. And this is her first time seeing Glaucus since she revealed I was the one who changed him. Um and so she says, when I'd asked Aedes if Glaucus feasted with the rest of the gods, he grinned. He's hiding that blue face of his. He's waiting for everyone to forget the truth of how he came by it. And
Yeah.
she realizes for the first time, I never thought about the consequences of telling everybody this, of
Mm-hmm.
doing this in the first place. Like, I just blew up a bunch of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so they the decision that they come to, it's we have agreed as well that these powers present no immediate danger. Perseus lives beyond our boundaries and is no threat. Pasiphae's husband is the son of Zeus, and he will be sure she is held to her proper place. Aedes will keep his kingdom as long as he agrees to be watched. My brother nodded gravely, but I saw the smile in his eyes. I can veil the sky itself, just try to watch me. Each of them has sworn, besides, that their powers came unbidden and unlooked for from no malice or attempted revolt. They stumbled upon their magic by herbs of accident. And so she's staring over at her brother at this point, seeing that she can't really tell what expression is on his face. But then her father continues, each of them, except for Circe. You were all here when she confessed that she sought her powers openly. She had been warned to stay away, yet she disobeyed. She defied my commands and contradicted my authority. She has turned her poisons against her own kind and committed other treacheries as well. She is a disgrace to our name, an ingrate to the care we have shown her. It is agreed with Zeus that for this she must be punished. She is exiled to a deserted island where she can do no more harm. She leaves tomorrow. And then everybody has a feast where they all ignore her.
And also, like, isn't there a part where the mom,
Yes,
they tell the mom that she can't have any more kids?
yeah, one more thing. As I noted, it is clear that the source of this new power comes from my union with Percy. So it is agreed I will sire no more children upon her.
Yeah.
And
And the
with
one,
that,
like,
she faints.
yeah, the one little bit of, like, empathy that I have for her mom is that the only power that she has in this world is the, like, idea of having more children to gain a better position in, and now because of that she can never have any ever again forever of all time
Pretty
with
much.
them. And it's like they never do anything else but live, like they don't sleep. And so it's just like that's a really long time to not be able to like move past the point that you are in this world beyond. I don't even know what could also happen, but that's just kind of she's stuck where she is now. And like she's horrible, so fine. But I still had some sort of empathy for her that it wasn't anything she did that led to her kids having those powers, but she's still being punished for it in some way because she's just the person that physically had them. And
Yeah.
other than that, this is just such like a scapegoat moment. Like I said, like Madeline is very like aggressive with her themes of what she wants you to think is going on, and it is a very aggressive thing. The idea that because Circe is the one that like told everybody because she wanted to be different from everybody else, and her brother says to her like, "Why did you tell them? Like, why not just if you would have not said anything, like we could have gotten by without any of this happening. Why would you ever tell them? Like he is lying to them. Like he like looked for his stuff too, but he just lied to them and told them that he didn't because he knew that if he lied to them, he could get by and wouldn't be punished. And so, but it is like the very much like scapegoat thing that we want like our family to be better, or like we want the environment that we're in to be different. And
Yeah.
so we do things that are different and we get really horribly punished for it because we're like we're trying to change people in some way sometimes without even meaning to, just because we're different. And it makes people really punish you really badly when you do try to do that, especially if you're somewhat successful at some of the things that you do try, because they don't want change. And that's very much like Circe was able to somehow get this power that the other people there can't like do. Like all the other powerful gods there can't do this power. They were sure that she was never going to do anything in her life, but somehow was able to like create a god on her own, which none of them can do, and turn Scylla into a monster, which none of them thought she could do, and they can't really do the same way. And so the way to get their power back is to like banish her so they never have to think about her again,
Yeah.
and also just make it clear like where she stands with them. It just like even with Percy Jackson stuff, like when he succeeds in getting the gods to do certain things differently, he's horribly punished in the next series of books. Like Hera kidnaps him. What the fuck? But that's like the kind of thing that is going on with Circe here, where they're like, well, you have this power that none of us can understand, and so you have to be banished because we have to make sure that nobody else ever tries to do something like this ever
Yeah.
again. Because we're supposed to be the one that has the most power here, not you.
Yeah, and I said this in our chats, even in our chat with Jean, who we've talked to on this podcast. Aedes reminds me a lot of a red pill dude.
Hmm.
And it's in this next conversation that I really feel it because, yeah, as you said, he's like, why did you tell them?
Hmm.
Like, if you had never said anything and they just discovered you had this power, you would have been fine just like me, just like Pasiphae, just like Perseus. But because you gave this confession, now everybody's looking at you. Like, and this isn't the first time you've done it. She worries for a second. She's like, wait, did you tell them about Prometheus? And he said, what, that you gave him a sip of nectar? No, I didn't. But she fully understands as this is happening, he probably sought his powers out too, that
Hmm.
he's going to continue using them and he's going to try to get around this like restriction and this watchfulness that they're going to have over him, and she's just left to feel stupid because she didn't game the system like him when she's never liked the system. Like this whole speech that her dad gave, where he's like, she's a disgrace to her name and angry to the care we've shown her. What care? What
Yeah,
care did you show her?
none. Yeah,
Like,
that part I was like, you never showed her any care, so why should she give you some when you've given her nothing? But that's very much how they would talk, how they do talk. Is like,
exactly.
how dare you defy me this way when I've given you a roof over your head and the clothes on your back and I feed you every day. And I'm like, those are things that you do. If you don't do, you end up in prison,
Pretty much, yep.
or you should be in prison if you don't do that. That's like a literal crime. And so I'm not sure why anyone should give you like credit for doing things that are considered a crime. Like, you did, congrats, you didn't commit a crime against your child. Do you want a cookie? You're not going to
Yeah.
get one. Like, because it's like, what are you talking about? But that's very much how that is. Like, oh, we gave you care. I'm like, no, you didn't give her anything. She just was stuck to be around you all the time. We all talked about how ugly her eyes were and how horrible her voice is.
And
um
that streak of links in her hair. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
yeah, like, you're the one that set her up to fall so easily for this guy in this way in the first place.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Um,
I do like what you said about her brother. I never noticed people like that because that was like how my dad was. Like, I say he's like the evil kind of autism, where
hmm.
your like, quote unquote, sense of justice is this personal justice, and you
Yeah.
don't have real empathy for other people, and so there's nothing that you will not do to like get what you want. That is
Yeah.
very much what he's like, but like, luckily, like him, he's not like super violent about it. He's just like, yeah, if you just shut up, we could keep doing all the fun things we're doing with our powers. Why didn't you just shut up?
Yeah.
Because
It gives
obviously that's what you should do, right?
it very much gives rugged individualism, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like
Yeah.
that kind of thinking. And
Hmm.
that's why I found him to be close to some of the red pilled neurodivergent people in my life,
Hmm.
because it's not necessarily I love this system, it's I'm smarter than the system so I know how to game it, and that's why
Yep.
I'm okay with this system continuing.
Yep. Like, I know how to manipulate this system, so I'm fine being in it because I know how to play everybody in it to get what I want.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he does all the time.
Yeah. So, one of the things he says to her in this final conversation, because she skipped the dinner, nobody was paying attention to her, so she went to go
Hmm.
pack up her room, never having left before and not even knowing what to pack. But his final conversation with her is, I finally met your Glaucus last night. I've never seen such a buffoon. Like, while she's basically getting exiled because of her affection for him. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of like, yes, in some way you're like you're doing the thing of like this guy that you're down bad for isn't even great, but like wrong time, bro.
I actually was okay with that because that's true. Like, when he was like, he's not even that great of a guy. I hope you get like better, what he says? Like, I hope you have like better standards like
Hmm.
next time you meet somebody. I was like, yeah. Like, that's really blunt, and like there's no like, care for her feelings, but that's also true. He's literally the first person that was just nice to you. And
Exactly.
you were like fantasizing about running off together and marrying him and being together for like you don't even know who this guy is. He's actually not that he's not that interesting. He's like
Yeah.
you made him super interesting because you thought because he was the nicest person to you so far that nobody else would ever be that nice to you ever again. And it's like
Yeah.
you could find somebody like much better than him if you gave yourself the option to imagine that more than one person will be nice to you.
Exactly.
God.
Um,
Sometimes we need somebody to just pop up and be like, why do you even care about them this much? And you're just sitting there like, why do I care
yep.
about them this much? Is it purely just because they like me? Because that's not enough.
Yeah. I mean, I've had my a lot of my like heartbreak in recent years has been friendships because I'm married, like we're good. But like with friends, I've had that situation of like this is just somebody who was nice to me and pursued me, and maybe I shouldn't have allowed it. Like maybe
Hmm.
I should have been a little bit more discerning about who I became friends with.
That was literally my life was like I would become friends with anyone that would be nice to me. Like if they were nice to me and wanted to be friends with me, I would be friends with them because just purely because they wanted to.
Yes.
I didn't even care about them. I didn't even know about them. I didn't even think about if I actually liked them as a person most of the time. I just wanted to be friends with them because they wanted to be around me at all. And
Yeah.
not everybody who wants to be friends with you is somebody that's actually like you have an opinion. Like, what is your opinion? I honestly didn't think about any of that until like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Of like, what do I think of this person? Do I even like them anymore? Did I ever like them? No, not really.
Yeah. So what we leave on too is kind of an interesting thing because I feel like there's multiple interpretations of it.
Hmm.
So as she's packing up, and again, remarking she has no idea what to pack up, she starts looking at this tapestry, and it's a tapestry with like a picture of a wedding on it. And so after Aedes leaves the room, she says, I considered the tapestry again. Its groom was goggle eyed, the bride buried in her veils, and behind them the family gaped like idiots. I had always hated it, let it stay and rot. And so one interpretation, I don't know, this was my first thought, was that was her rejecting marriage, especially because we have all of the talk of nymphs and brides and weddings before this. But I know another interpretation of this is her rejecting everything her family stands for.
Yeah, I took it as that. I took it like this because this is what I did, and this is what a lot of like abuse victims, especially as kids, do too. Is that you had like this idea of what your path in your life was going to be like because of what your family said you should do. And then you realize at a certain point when you are able to like get away from them and start thinking for yourself, like, I don't want to do this stuff just because my family wants me to do it. And so to me, I looked at that as like she's rejecting like the path that her family wanted her to be on. And that could include, marriage, but I also just look at it as it's more of an idea of like I'm not going to get married in the way that my family would want me to. Like my family would want me to get married to somebody for like power moves, for positions of power and money and things like that.
Hmm.
But I was like, she could still get married because she actually likes somebody, like cares for them or something. You
Yeah.
can still do things like that, even if you're not doing it for the reason that your family might want you to do them for. Um,
Hmm.
and so that's more what it felt like to me is just the idea of like, I'm rejecting being a part of this family, like following the rules, trying to make them happy, and
Hmm.
instead I'm just going to do what I think is right. And if I end up getting married or having kids or doing things that my family wanted me to do, it's going to be for a totally different reason than they would have wanted me to anyway. And
Hmm.
that's just like how I think about that stuff like now. That's how I think about my life now anyway.
Yeah.
And but like that's how a lot of us feel is like realizing like, oh, the world is like very open to me now, and so I have the choice to decide whatever I want to do. And so instead of like being like my parents wanted me to get married or my parents wanted me to become like a doctor, so I'm never going to become a doctor. Instead it's like, well, maybe I will one day, but it's because I want to do it.
Yeah.
not because they're pressuring me into it, and just kind of letting yourself end up where you want to be because it's where you actually want to go, instead of doing things to make other people happy. That's what that really made me think of, is her trying to be like, I'm just going to try to be myself and make decisions because it makes me happy, instead of trying to do things that will make other people happy.
Yeah.
um and that's just
And
what
I mean,
I
we
thought
all
anyway.
had we both probably had our own versions of that. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back on Wednesday for a mishmash of topics. And if you guys want to hear about anything in particular, our DMs are open as always.
Hmm. Let us know.